تاريخي زبرخ وبكل يقليل بطوفة ريز حلخ من اللتي حديقي حدش من اللت فبرخ وندو يحك أخيو بمسلين لت بهلخ وووي بمسلين نتي وندو يحك أخيو بمسلين نتي ولدي ولدي ولدوش يسبخالو أنا خحافر له من اللتيك قبر كدبي تقليلو زانتالنا فترو السور زي بلو عينين زريقون داولو ألو في خاص فلان كتكون وما نخي سناف دخويني زي أنا زمسل ما كنت تسيني أنا مبريتاي بخور زي الزاني ودتهم طبيبان نبوك كل سلطاني ود مدر بحري ود مدر إبر دبر سينا سفر تاريخ وكل مدر ناقر يحاتوا لدي كساب جاف زغوت ود بحر نقستاتي مروستو زفكر قدم الله في زبنات فيدل فاتور على ما بقر تخلع مسلم نقرز الجمر قدف حق السيف حق قرب زمهر عودة وارح زقمرو نبال غرس زوكر كلاوة يا عمي الله يزودي سيد عدلنا سرت سلطاني وخابتنتي انه عسرك وحيته بدل كله حولتي انه مسكين عدولي سناتنا عروستي انه هي ومسكرنا يخشو ما يحولتي الفقدامات مش متحفتي ندرس بعد علي مدرتهم فكرتي شديديدي شدادو دادو شديدي دادو شدالو لالو هلاو يا سيد عدلنا سرت سلطاني وخابتنتي انه عسرك وحيته بدل كله حولتي انه مسكين عدولي سناتنا عروستي انه هي ومسكرنا يخشو ما يحولتي الفقدامات مش مزحفتي ندرس بعد علي مدرتهم فكرتي شديديدي شدادو دادو شديدي دادو شدالو لالو ويلك
Hello, everyone. Apologize for the technical issues we had this morning. Our service provider had their server down, and it took them hours to fix. We are back, and today it's my great pleasure to have now almost a household name within UMD Media household, Yusuf Gabrahewat, but on a totally different subject matter today. We'll be talking about the Seedling for Peace and Democracy in Ethiopia, in Eritrea. I had a lot of talk about it in Eritrea, and
I know.
this is a new movement. And Yosef Gabrahewat is the chair of the executive committee, and we'll be talking about what, why, and how. And so, those who are following us live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, thank you for viewing us, and we would like you to share it so that many can access this material. So the topic today is a new movement in Eritrea, the Seedling for Peace and Democracy in Eritrea. Yosef Gabrahewat is with me today. Welcome, Yosef.
Thank you, Getachew. I'm glad that I'm back, and I mean, I'm also glad that our listeners are still there. I hope because they haven't been here for a while. So thanks a lot.
Great, awesome. So we will, as I mentioned and advertised since yesterday, what is this movement? Why the need for this, and how? We'll be talking about that. First off, I want to take you to Valentine's Day this year. So, what has Valentine's Day to do with the seedling for peace and democracy in Eritrea? February 14th.
Oh, February 14th. Oh, okay. Well, it's I believe it's it's the day it started, huh? And now it's almost how many months has it been right now? I believe it is January, February. It's
Five,
about five
five,
months, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the day it was. 5 months. Yeah, that was the day it was founded. But it took us probably 2 months, around 2 months to kind of get our acts together and come out in the public. We made a public announcement almost 2 months after that. And now, since the beginning, I mean, since the time that we have come to public, it has been, what should I call it? Sometimes a roller coaster, sometimes also kind of an amazing journey because we never expected to grow, for the organization to grow this fast. So it has been quite hectic months in between. Yeah.
Hmm. So maybe talking about the name, maybe even the logo, all that. So what is Seedling for Peace and Democracy in Eritrea?
Mhm. All right, okay. Let me start with the name. Well, we call it for Seedling for Peace and Democracy in Eritrea, precisely because there has been neither democracy nor peace in Eritrea for almost 60 years. You could say since the time it was united with Ethiopia, it has been, since the time the guerrilla warfare started, up to now, there has never been peace in Eritrea, and there has been never democracy in Eritrea even before then. So our idea, the idea, the name that we have been given is a very modest one. All that we are saying is that if you could bring a regime change in Eritrea right now, a regime change in Asmara, all that we are hoping for is to plant the seeds of peace and democracy in that particular area, including the region around it. I think it's a modest goal, but I also do believe it could be done. Uh, well, if you want me to go ahead and explain uh, uh, what is it exactly? I mean,
Exactly.
is it an organization? Is it
Party.
an alliance? Huh? Is it an umbrella? It's a gathering, because that has been somewhat controversial sometimes, huh? Because of the nature of of its organization. Uh, for example, among the Eritrean opposition movements, huh, there has been alliances created before. One of them, for example, was called an umbrella. It was an umbrella, and under that umbrella, you find various political movements. Nevertheless, all of them were political movements. So they were of one type. Categorically, I'm talking about the categorical nature of those that were under the umbrella. In our case, it's a little bit different, precisely because it's not easy to categorize them under one type. What we have gathered, in general, we could say that these are forces of change. They could come under different names, under different types, but all of them are forces of change. They do want to change to see change in Eritrea, but they come under different forms. For example, we have almost, I believe, we have 7 or 6 political movements, huh? And then there are also uh, media organizations, about 12 of them. There are also civic organizations, but not entirely. Well, usually when we talk about organizations, usually they are apolitical, but these ones are political ones. So the line is between them and the political movements is not that defined. Huh? So we have that. And then there's, of course, cultural associations and, of course, individuals also, non-affiliated individuals. There are many of them. Of course, they make the bulk of the organization is non-affiliated individuals. So you could see these non-affiliated individuals, their membership is directly to FLC, to that organization. But the others, they come through their organizations. So it's almost a hybrid one, where you have these fully formed organizations whose members make allegiance to FLC through their organizations. So they keep their independence, it means. And then there are at least half of it are individuals who have direct allegiance to direct membership to the movement. So this, for some time, it has created a categorical problem among us on how to categorize it. Not only on how to categorize it, categorization is needed for certain reasons. For example, how do you represent them? How do you represent them in the structure that we have created? How do they vote? And how, for example, a political organization and a civic organization, would they be equally represented? Do we do it through their membership, their number of membership, and so on and forth? So we have created a committee of experts to sort through all these categorical problems, huh? And they are coming out with a very ingenious, bylaws that could accommodate all these groups. The work is in progress right now, but I am sure we will sort it out. The other part, probably, about the nature of this organization, as I told you before, is that it even surprised us, the ones who have created this organization, because of it was the fast, it spread very fast and wide all over the world. For example, when we started with few individuals in one, not necessarily in one area, but people that met uh, under one organization, under one branch. I mean, now it has grown so big within these 3 months. We have we have opened 5 different branches. One is in the US, another in Canada, another in Europe, another one in Africa and Asia, or even though Asia By Asia, we mean almost literally Israel, that's where tens of thousands of Eritreans are living there. And lately, we have another one in Australia. But that was not enough because as the numbers of the members keep growing, we had also to open branch locally. For example, in Canada, we already have one in Toronto, one in Ottawa, and another one in Calgary. In Europe, there are about 7 countries, almost in all Scandinavian countries, except probably of Finland, I believe. In Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, we have branch over there. And then Germany, Holland, England, and Switzerland. So we have already about 7 branches within Europe. So is it within USA, many cities like Denver, DC, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles. These are the branches that we have been opening. So it has been, and it took us only 3 months to do this. And for those who are listening to us, probably if they go to our website, felsisalam.org, they could probably even, there is a lot of information there. And in addition to that, they want to register also. We have a format over there which could easily lead them what they should do. So that probably would be a good some kind of an introduction into the nature of into the structural nature. I have not yet talked about its goals and stuff like that, its vision or what it intends to do. But structurally, probably as an introduction, that will do it, I guess. Unless you have additional questions in regarding to that. Huh?
Yeah, great. I think we can come back to that as well. So, one thing that you were mentioning, there are a number of existing umbrella organizations, alliances, and so on. Maybe I was trying to show that here. This is just some. So, here is Eritrean Democratic Alliance, another one is Eritrean Unity for Democratic Change, and one organization maybe could come under another organization as well. So even movements. So this is globally Yakal movement and so on. So one would ask definitely a natural question is, and all these, they one way or another say that they are for regime change, changing the government, the regime in Asmara. So there would definitely people who would be interested to know why is FALSI or the Seedling for Peace and Democracy in Eritrea, SPDE, different? What is that you are doing different?
All right, yeah. I believe it's a very, a legitimate question, because as usual, this kind of organizations have been for almost 3 decades. They have come under different names. Many of them, these ones are probably the ones that have survived. But there has been also many others that haven't survived along the way. So what is it that we are trying to plan to do different than the other organizations? Okay. Prior to that, though, I forgot one thing to add on the nature of the organization. I mentioned media outlets, for example, are part of the what makes the categorization very difficult was that one of them was in the media organizations that joined the movement. There are about 12 of them. 12 media organizations have joined us, which is probably the majority of all the opposition media outlets, like Teddy Press, J Studio, Tafetawi, Alana, Raina, Fnan App, Temasgan Network, the Hyman Isayat, Tennis Beerta, Pivot Show, Admas Media. All these organizations are media outlets have joined us, and that's one of the reasons why even the issue of representation becomes difficult when it comes to media outlets. You could easily see it. On the movements, I forgot, there are bright feature, Eritrean Unity for Justice, Eritrean Network for Justice, Popular Struggle for Eritrean Freedom, Eritrean Front for Safety of the Country or Defense of the Country. These are the kind of movements that are now that have joined us. And then there is also recently a Kunama movement, Kunama-based movement has joined us. On the civic groups, we have also Badr Bahri, and then there are also what I call them identity organized organizations, identity groups, like, for example, Auraja, Auraja Sarai, Auraja Kolokzai, and things like that. We'll come to them later. Sorry that I backtracked. Let me go back to your question. Why do we think that FELSI could deliver, whereas others haven't delivered yet? First of all, I want to approach this question with caveat. There is a reason why others have failed. It's not entirely their fault. Why they have failed is not entirely their fault. They could have done many things wrong, but unless they found a partner, a partner nation, be it Ethiopia or Sudan, a neighboring nation that accommodates them, that helps them, that would be willing to be a stage of resistance in order to conduct a regime change in Asmara, then whatever they do, even if they did everything right, they would fail. So for us, it seems to me that now, at this point in time, the timing is perfect. All that we have done at this point, differently from them in this regard, is that to realize that the timing is now is a perfect timing right now. Why do I say that? Well, in the past, let's say 27 years, when EPRDF was ruling Ethiopia, at least the last 20 years after the border war with Eritrea, EPRDF was nominally supporting different Eritrean opposition groups within Ethiopia. But EPRDF's policy had always been containment over regime change. Its primary concern was how to contain Eritrea. It considered Eritrea as a small, poor, and weak nation, and hence all that it needed to do was to contain it. Now, of course, at that point in time, they could be true. Now we see it's totally different. It's not simply a nuisance. Eritrea is not simply a nuisance. It has become an existential threat. But at that point in time, that's what they considered. Even the opposition groups that they used to help, like, for example, the ethnic ones like the Kunamas and the Afars, they were designed to fit into that containment formula. They were used tit for tat. For example, whenever Eritrea does did some kind of mischief within Ethiopia, then a proportional response from Ethiopia. There used to be a proportional response. In that proportional response, the Kunamas or the Kunama or the Afar movements might have been used in that way. In general, though, EPRDF never set out to, totally set out to bring regime change in Asmara. Now, this is what has totally changed. The Isaias regime has clearly become a threat. For Tigray, it has become an existential threat. For Ethiopia, it has become a huge destabilizing force that it might even lead to disintegration. For the region in general, also, even though the destabilizing center, the epicenter of the destabilization of the region is in Ethiopia, it's reaching out towards those. It reaches towards the periphery. For example, Somalia, South Sudan, even Kenya. So now, even these nations, these nations in the Horn of Africa and the Eastern of Africa, most of them consider Isaias a threat. They want him to go. So we have a different picture is emerging. One of the reasons why they want him to go is that he is the one who has let in the regional forces into the region, probably in addition to Somalia. For the first time in the history of the Horn of Africa and in the history of Eastern Africa, we are seeing regional forces like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Israel, and Turkey interfering heavily in that region. They consider the entire that area as their backyard. Even when they are squabbling among each other, it's fighting over the turfs that they want to be over the turfs in that area. So that phenomena, one of the main characters or one of the main entities that brought that phenomena into that area is believed to be Isaias Afwerki. So for that reason also they want him to go. And also the West also, especially the EU, has, I mean, throughout the years it has it's almost not America, at least for on the American side, it was containment. Whenever he was supposed to sponsor some kind of terrorism, then America used to counter it by sanctions. So for America, similar to what Ethiopia was doing at that time, it was containment. For EU, though, it goes beyond that. It was appeasement. But now, both of them have turned against Isaias Afwerki, especially the US. Especially now after the Ukraine war, when Isaias Afwerki openly sided with Russia, and some believe that if we don't know if and when, but it's more likely to give Russia a base somewhere along the Red Sea coast, because he's looking for a protector. He believes that the same way Russia has protected the Assad family in Syria, they also he also expects that the only way he could be protected from the wrath of the neighborhood, from the wrath of Tigray, from the wrath of USA and others, is by bringing Russia into the game. So for all of these reasons, I'm mentioning all these reasons because the timing is perfect now. At no time before have so many forces agreed that the Isaias regime has to go. So that is one of the things that we did as Felsi organization. We realized the moment and we grabbed it. So that's one of the things that we did. The other part that we have done differently from the other ones is on the question of unity. Eritrea, as you know, even though it's a small nation, there are ethnic groups. It's made up of 9 ethnic groups in a population of 3.5 million. It's almost half to half divided between two major religions, Islam and Christianity. So the divide in the land goes deep. There is the issue of Arabism versus Habesha. There is the issue of language, Tigrinya versus Arabic. There is also ethnic divisions, regional divisions, and all of these things. For all these reasons, unity has been one of the main topics that has always been talked about in among political movements. So, nevertheless, even when they made, for example, an umbrella of different kinds of organizations, in the end, the reason why these umbrellas didn't work has to do with this deeply embedded divisions within the population. Now, we believe, we don't have a magic wand, and we don't believe that we will solve this deep-seated solutions overnight. But what we have come up with was that instead of focusing on the various parts of the population, various parts of political affiliations, religious uh, uh, divisions, and so forth, it would be better if we focus on a very minimalist agenda that joins all of us. The minimalist agenda, the entire movement has based its strategy on this minimalist agenda. What we did was we came up with three agendas. One is regime change. Okay, on this one, almost every political movement from the opposition, almost every political movement of whatever persuasion, of whatever ideology, of whatever ethnicity accepts regime change. In fact, all of them work to bring regime change in Asmara. So that's number one. We don't have a problem of division on that goal. The second one is the respect for the sovereignty of Eritrea. That one too, almost all of them take it as a default position. They don't even talk about it most of the time because they take it as given. The last one is a controversial one. That is the relationship with Tigray. On our FELSI has made the relationship of Tigray one of the corners for regime change in Eritrea. We have reasons, probably we'll come to it. We'll later talk with you about it. But that has become the most controversial issue now, which is dividing the political movements in diaspora. There are many of them who believe that we shouldn't make an alliance with Tigray. There are others that sympathize with what has been going on in Tigray, but nevertheless, they don't want to make an alliance with Tigray. But FELSI believes, for both principled and pragmatic reasons, there is no way we could bring regime change in Asmara without aligning ourselves with Tigray, with the population of Tigray, and with TDF in general. So that makes it also different from the other groups. And we do believe, that this move, without this one, nothing could be delivered. The last one is on the kind of organizations that we have been willing to accommodate. Remember, Eritreans are very nationalistic, and anything that they consider is sub-nationalistic, they look at it with suspicion. For example, there are many identity-based political groups or civic groups nowadays that you could, from outside they seem to be sub-national, but they are not. In reality, they are not. It's only that they could only work effectively at that level. I mentioned it before. There are some which are organized along their own provinces, or just as we used to call them, or there are others that are comfortable working with their own ethnic group. For example, Kunama, Afar, Bilen. There are others even that are religiously organized. There are Muslim organizations that are organized along the religious line. So for us, what we are saying is that all of them are welcome so far as they subscribe to those three minimalist agendas that we have set out, that I have said at the beginning of our constitution or senate. So in general, there are many others that separate us, but in general, these are the three parts that I believe have been are different from the workings of other political groups that used to be that are even now, uh, among them you have mentioned some of them over there. Thank you.
Great. With that, I think you mentioned the regime change a number of times in terms of comparing it with the other alliances, organizations, all that. And so one wonders always, specifically in that part of the world, people ask, okay, regime change, that's possible. It happened in Ethiopia in 2018. It is happening everywhere. But then what? So, what is your broader vision beyond regime change?
Well, okay. Our broader vision, or even I would call it our goal, huh?
Mm,
Regime change is, as you said, it happens everywhere in Africa. Huh? But after regime change, uh, what are we planning to do after regime change?
mm,
Okay, one of the things that we want to do is uh, we want a peaceful transition into a democratic nation. Peaceful transition, which means we have to create a government in transition, but not from outside. We do not. Let me make this clear. We are not a transitional government. The FLC is not a transitional government. It doesn't intend to be a transitional government. But what it wants is once this regime has been changed, has been removed, then it will work with others, with the rest of Eritreans, be it in outside or be it in inside Eritrea, different civic groups, different political groups, with all of them to create, call it a national gathering, to create uh, a transitional government. After that, of course, we will have to go back. What has happened before in Eritrea. It's always the talk is about Quam or about constitution. One could craft a constitution, and if they want to, they could even adapt the constitution that they have. It's up to them, up to the transitional government. They could come up with the constitution, and then create a democratic government. But before that, there is one issue that I would like to stress. Because the case of Eritrea is totally different from the case of Ethiopia or the case of many other African countries. Usually, what they lack in most of the cases is a democratic process or a democratic mechanism. That's where they always fight for. But in Eritrea, Eritrea is a different beast. Uh, in Tigrinya, we call it Nubur Mutfa. It's the normal things that are accepted everywhere in the rest of the world, even in dictatorships that are missing in Eritrea. Take, for example, uh, uh, um, school. I mean, people do not, children go to school until 10th grade, when they are teenagers, the nation comes and takes them away from their families. It takes them to Sawa, a camp in the desert. The entire uh, uh, students, 11th grade students of Eritrea, the entire nation are taken to one camp. The reason for that is they want to make soldiers out of them. In fact, soldiers is even a benign word when compared to what they are trying to do. They want to reinvent the liberation fighter of the yesteryears. So they would like to make a new liberation warriors, a Spartan warriors, to create a Spartan warriors out of these teenagers, and most of them would end up in the national service, indefinite national service. In the indefinite national service, some of them have lasted for 20 years. They have been uh, wandering in the Eritrean wilderness for about 20 years. Most of them, they don't stay that long. They leave the country. That's why Eritrea, from African nations, is the number one nation in terms of refugees that happen to arrive in Europe, for example. The number is staggering. Almost a million people have left Eritrea, a nation of 3 million people. A quarter of its people has left precisely because the nation is unbearable to live. And we are not talking about, all kinds of demographics. The people that, the population group that live Eritrea are mainly young and men. So the demographic consequences of this is huge. The women that are left, for example, inside Eritrea, they have nobody to marry them. So most of them end up being spinsters, or they will have to have, if they want kids, they will have to do it illegitimately. So demographically, for example, if just almost a million young men that had left the nation, had they remained in Eritrea, then we would have seen almost 2 or 3 million population, because these are the ones that uh, at a higher fertility level, So literally, for example, if you compare Tigray with Eritrea, Tigray and Eritrea had similar number of populations during Haile Selassie era. At the end of Haile Selassie era, both of them have between 1.5 to 2 million population. Now Ethiopia has 123 million. Tigray has more or less a double that of Eritrea, and some areas like Kojam have triple of that of Eritrea. It means Eritrea has lost about 3-4 million people in between. Now, it's a very abnormal nation. The people that live there are no universities. The universities have been closed, and so on and so forth. All that I am trying to say is, if you ask the Eritrean people, for example, now, what is it that you expect? What do you want to come as a change? I doubt that democracy would come up as a priority. Although, of course, they do want that too. I think they would say "Nuburk less," which means for all the normal things that happen everywhere else in the world to return back. We want our children back. So one of the things that we will do, our vision is, to that process, to eliminate that process that have become the reason for the loss of so many people in Eritrea. In fact, I call it generational genocide. What has been committed in Eritrea has been a generational genocide on the people of Eritrea. The reason why they don't call it genocide are various. One of the things is that the same people, it's the same people that are committing genocide on you. I mean, from the same family. The older brothers, the liberators, are conducting genocide on their sons and younger brothers. There is no book. There is no UN definition that could accommodate that kind of genocide nowadays. So one of the reasons why they don't call it genocide is that. The other reason is that it's not done the way dramatically the way it has been done in Rwanda, or the way it's being done right now in Tigray. It has been done year after year. Every year, 50,000, 100,000 of people flee the country, and the country keeps, dwindling. The population keeps dwindling. The nation keeps dying. So literally, genocide is being conducted now in Eritrea. So in order to avoid that, the biggest hurdle is SAWA and the indefinite national service. As part of our vision, then we want to totally eliminate that. Of course, we go beyond that, as I said. Of course, we want democracy. We also want to rebuild Eritrea. How do you rebuild Eritrea? Think about that. How do you rebuild it? If demographically it has been hollowed out. Nowadays in Eritrea, especially in the village, if you go into the village, you either find underage children whose population has been dwindling, but mostly old or old men and women. That has become the fate of Eritrean villages and towns all over the place. Now, how do we rebuild a nation with this kind of demography? One of our hopes is the diaspora Eritrea itself. Diaspora Eritrea has a huge population. As I said, there are more than 1 million Eritreans all over the globe. These are young, talented, educated, uh, and also many of them have become uh, rich even in many places. For example, if you go to Angola right now, there are about 20 to 30,000 Eritreans in Angola, believe it or not. And out of this, there are many millionaires, multi-millionaires, and even billionaires are there in Angola. And Uganda has now turned out to be the epicenter of Eritrean refugees in that area. Given that Ethiopia has become hostile to Eritreans, Sudan has its own problems. There are about 70,000 Ugandans right now in Uganda. Eritreans, 70,000 Eritreans in Uganda. There are more than 100,000 in Sudan, tens of thousands in Ethiopia, tens of thousands in Israel, hundreds of thousands in Europe, hundreds of thousands in all over the place in the world, US, Canada, Australia. So these are the people that will rebuild Eritrea. To me, this will be a huge resource that has yet to be tapped. Of course, Shabia is doing the opposite, but part of our vision is how do you bring back, at least, if not totally all of them, many of them back to Eritrea and rebuild it again. There are some others too, but I don't want to get into all of that. There is also the idea of how do you politically uh, 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 create a stable nation, a stable Eritrea. That too, we are looking into it. For example, we'll come back to it, but part of the reason why I'm mentioning that is that it doesn't the vision that we have for Eritrea, it doesn't focus only on Eritrea itself, because nowadays it's impossible to isolate Eritrea from the rest of the region. So we have that geopolitical vision. How do you geopolitically position Eritrea in that area? That area. You know what I mean when I talk about the Horn of Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Africa, the Red Sea, where regional forces are vying with each other, where global forces are vying with each other. For example, take Djibouti. You have all the global powers stationed over there. The US, China, France, and so forth. And you have the others also, the regional forces. UAE has a huge base in Assab. So how do we geopolitically position Eritrea? That is also part of our vision. How do you geopolitically position it? It's impossible. You cannot do it alone. So we have to create alliances within that area. And the first primary candidate for that alliance would be, of course, Tigray. But not only Tigray. We have other nations like Sudan, even Ethiopia. If there is a regime change over there, Djibouti, and all the other areas. The East African community nowadays, it has been revived. And could we have a similar kind of community in our area? So the vision that we have is broad, probably over ambitious, but nevertheless, it tries to address all the problems that we will be facing uh, when creating or rebuilding the Eritrea that we want to create.
Great. I think.
I,
Thank you, Joseph. You in the document as well as in your speech, in your contribution today, you are talking about Tigray having a central element in terms of your alliance and the broader vision and so on. So um, I saw 12 points mentioned there in terms of the principles that you outlined. Can you speak to that? So why a special emphasis on Tigray in terms of your relation with Tigray? You mentioned about potentially, looking at Somalia, Djibouti, and all that, but why Tigray in terms of focus?
Well, okay. People, I think people seem to forget, because this question, it's not just you. It comes from every other corner. On your case, I'm sure it's from a positive stand, but still, uh, when people keep asking us this question, they tend to forget, that we happen to be the same people. It's as simple as that. The first thing that we have to remember is that uh, 55% of Eritreans are Tigrinya speaking people, and Tigray is probably 99% Tigrinya speaking people. So we have, uh, we are the same people in terms of ethnicity, in terms of language, in terms of religion, history, tradition, and all of that. But not only Tigrinya speaking. For example, the Saho of Eritrea have their counterparts in the Europe of Tigray. The Kunamas straddle uh, both countries. Uh, and even when you talk about Ago, there are Agos in Tigray, and there is also the Ago land, which is their neighbor. Uh, we have their counterpart in Bilen of Eritrea. But it's not only, the close. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact to have that kind of sameness. For example, language-wise, Tigray and Tigrinya are probably the two eldest siblings of Giz. So there you have it. So if you add Tigray and Tigrinya in Eritrea, they make up almost 85% of the language that is spoken in Eritrea. And then there is a history in general, Aksumite Empire, which at the beginning you have shown as the song Mennet. That's exactly what he was addressing. He was saying that the Aksumite Empire starts from Adulis, from Eritrea, all the way to Aksum and beyond. Huh? But it's not only the Aksumite Empire. Even after that, it's just with the coming of Italians that the relationship between these two Tigrinya-speaking people was severed. It was after with the Italian colonization. And if you know the area very well, as I do, for example, in Saraje, where I am from, you see from Adduhala areas, to Kwahain, to Zaida Kolom, all of that area along the river, along the Merab River, there has been intermarriages, migrations, trade, and so forth, and pilgrimages. All of these kinds of interaction for millennia. You also find it in Hazomo and Sanafe around the Shimazana area, the same thing. So there is a deep historical, traditional, and religious link, uh, a very deep one. Now, why is it important that we are stressing the sameness? Why? Why is it important? Precisely because the counter narrative that comes from the Isaias regime does the opposite. It tries to create, it teaches its people that they are different from the Ethiopians, different from, especially from Tigrayans. It feels that unless it creates a huge wall, I mean, it creates a huge gap between the Tigrinya speaking of Eritrea and Tigray, then the very idea of Eritrean identity would be at risk. This is what it has taught these kids that I was talking about, the kids that were taken to Sawa and the indefinite national service. No wonder then It is this soldiers when they entered Tigray that committed the atrocious crimes. For example, our fathers, I'm talking about Eritrean fathers, our fathers and forefathers, they would have never, I mean, literally, they are turning in their graves on the very idea of their sons and their grandsons going to Tigray, burning churches, burning monasteries, burning branas, because this is their own churches, their own monasteries, and their own branas. But why did they do it? Because that's exactly the narrative that has been installed, uh, uh, inculcated in them day and night with Sha'biya propaganda. Now, when we say that we are the same people, we are not simply proclaiming sameness. It's precisely because had the Eritrean population known, had the Eritrean, especially the soldiers, known that they are the same people, then they wouldn't have been able to commit genocide inside Tigray. That's one. The other part, which is I think is very important also, is that we, at least we on the selfie, on the Felsi side, on the Seedling side, what we have understood is, especially after the war, one of the reasons why we panicked was after the war, after this genocidal war. Uh, what we understood is that the survival of these two people are very much intertwined, are intimately tied to one another. One tribe, for example, if they had succeeded the way they had started in Tigray, eliminating the people of Tigray, killing millions of them, the rest of them subjugating them, Amharanizing them, or whatever, then the next thing would be the Eritrean Tigrinyas would be, they would have the same fate. It might come late, but it would happen. So the idea of this has happened in history, by the way. Whenever, as I said before, the problem of the Tigrinya speaking people started with the colonization of Italians. Once that colonization started, the Italians were under the fascist, the Eritreans came under the fascist rule of Italy, and the Tigrayans had to face also another kind of subjugation from Showa. So the sandwiching of Tigray, the encirclement of Tigray started at that point in time. Tigray remained sandwiched between Italy and Showa, at least the Ethiopia of Showa, for almost 60, 70 years until the Kadamai Wayani, the first Wayani. So what again? This happened again at the second case. This happened was when EPRDF and TPLF uh, fought a war of the border war of 1998. With that, again, they were separated. They were separated, and that resulted again, similarly to what happened before with Italy and Showa. Now what happened was Sha'biya conducted what I told you before, the generational genocide on its people. That generational genocide started right after the war, right after the border war. It focused on the young population of Eritrea because Sha'biya taught, Higdef, the Isaias regime taught that it cannot survive unless it gains total control over the population, especially over the young population. The generational genocide followed precisely because of that separation. On the Ethiopian side, Tigray thought it was safe, but it was not safe. Already, half Tigray was under half encirclement. With the coming of Abiy, that became full encirclement. And what has happened in Eritrea, the generational genocide that happened in Eritrea, came in a much more brutal way to hound Tigray. So the lessons that we take from all of this is that unless there is some kind of this kind of setting apart, these two people has to stop. if we have to find a permanent solution uh, to the plight of these two people. The third one is, of course, the genocide itself. We Eritreans have realized it, at least those with conscience, we have realized it, that we as a people have committed a crime inside Tigray. The genocide that has happened in Tigray is Eritrea was part of the partners in genocide. I call them partners in genocide, which is Eritrea, Amhara, and the rest of Ethiopia under the federal government. These are the three entities that cooperated in conducting a genocide in Eritrea, in Tigray, and it's still going on. That genocide, by the way, is still going on now. So we, as members of uh, uh, FELSI, believe that first of all, we have to acknowledge that this has been committed, because there are many who deny it already. Denial is part of the genocide anyway, so they are denying it. Many of them from Eritrean side, I'm talking from Eritrean side, many of them are denying it. But we, the members of FELSI, we acknowledge that this crime has been committed inside Tigray. And following that, we will do anything to stop it, because it's still going on right now. We'll do whatever it takes, to stop this genocide. After that, we'll have a common enemy, unless the Asmara regime is gone. This genocide will never stop. In fact, the road to the shortest road to stop this genocide is not marching to Addis Ababa, but marching to Asmara. So we have a common enemy with the Eritrean opposition forces and the TDF, and we have to bring about the regime change in Asmara. And after that, of course, we will have to create to have a way of saying never again. What do we do to stop? To stop this genocide from ever happening again. There is a lot of things, we could learn from Rwanda, South Africa, and the others. Reconciliation is one part of it, but I think it should go beyond that. How do we connect these two people together so that it will never happen again? Is probably part of the biggest question that we should ask. The fourth one is the reason why we are stressing Tigray as a special enemy. I have already touched it. It's a common enemy to both of us. As an example, the biggest example is that it conducted genocide on its own people, and it's now conducting genocide in Tigray. So there is no bigger enemy that we have. It's a common enemy, and we should work together to. That's another reason why we are focusing on. We have put special emphasis on the relationship with Tigray. The last one is the feature itself. I mentioned a little bit of it, the geopolitical positioning of Eritrea. But the geopolitical position of Eritrea cannot be done without the geopolitical positioning of Tigray. So both our fates also are tied together in this regard. Remember that Tigray would have won this war had it not been for the interference of United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Persia, and all the rest with their drones, with their hundreds of drones coming against Tigray. So Tigray, I'm sure that the TDF leadership never even thought in their wildest, nightmare that this thing could happen. All that they have been thinking was either Eritrea or the enemies as coming from Eritrea and from Ethiopia, but not from regional forces. The 21st century is going to be a very tough century for nations like Eritrea and Tigray, which are small ones, So unless there is an alliance made in between them and others like them, they cannot survive these regional forces, these global forces that are vying, that in fact that they are fighting in their making our area their own backyard. So for all these reasons, then we believe that uh, the relationship with Tigray should be prioritized more than anything else, more than the others in the region. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Yosef. And we will be finishing the show with the last question for the day. So the question is about uh, maybe related to the question I asked before, but in a more focused way. Okay, let's say regime change happens tomorrow in Asmara. So what is your in your thought in terms of stabilizing it? Because there is a lot of worry about if you see what the European Union did when it comes to Tigray, they were first and foremost worried about the refugees that would end up in Europe, right? And so they directly or indirectly work together with the regime in Addis to seal off, let's say, that Western Tigray. So the US is also the same worry about this kind of regime change when it comes to stability. Even if, like you said, time has changed, many countries agree on Isaiah has to go. So what is your thought on that?
Mhm. Well, that question also has been coming up again and again. In fact, more than individuals, it came from diplomats. They look at our Senate, at our constitution. We give it to them, and they read it, and they say, "Okay, good. This looks good." And let's say that at one point you will have your regime change. How do you intend to stabilize the country? That has been their prominent question. Now, here is roughly part of it, part of those factors I did mention before. When we talk about stabilizing Eritrea, we are talking about various aspects of that stabilization. One is militarily, is the obvious one. You don't want many factions fighting against one another, for example, as it is the case in Somalia, as it has been the case in Somalia. And then there is, of course, politically. How do you stabilize politically? How do you create a politically stable government, a democratic government, but yet stable? How do you create it? And then there is socially also. Socially, as I said before, it has been totally weakened. It has been hollowed out. The most productive force has left the country. How do you the religions also have been gutted out. Uh, Evangelical churches have been outlawed. The Jehovah's Witnesses have been outlawed. The Coptic Church, its own, its own patriarch have been under house arrest until he died lately. So uh, how do we uh, uh, reverse this phenomena? What do we do to reverse this phenomena? So socially also, what do we do to stabilize the country? And then of course there is another obvious one, economically. What do you do economically? How do you stabilize this country? First of all, on the military one. On the military one, from day one, if you have seen in our constitution, uh, what we have said is that only one military should be allowed. We have a reason why we are saying that. Because a number of factions throughout these 20 something years, we have seen probably, I don't know, 20 or more than 20 armed groups. Most of them, they have only a few of them. They don't even number in hundreds, let alone in thousands. But yet, they were divided along various, schisms. So we know that. So what we intend to do is, from the very beginning, there should be only one military in Eritrea. Even as a resistance force, there should be only one resistance force within, for example, if it is in Tigray or in Sudan, then we have to work very hard. This is not, I mean, this is not only up to us, but that is what it should be. One military force, but various political voices. We understand multiplicity when it comes to political movements, but we don't understand multiplicity when it comes to uh, military organized groups. So one military is very essential to create, but that's not only the only one. For example, if the regime change in Asmara is changed, we also will need allies that help us stabilizing the area. So that help from the allies also would be necessary, but mainly that part, the military part, should be only one military is our stand. Socially, I have already probably explained the Nubur versus democracy, or normalization versus democratization. You know, uh, for Eritrea, especially now, it seems a luxury. The idea of democracy. I don't mean that I'm not trying to belittle democratization, but it has always been a luxury for them. What they want to things to turn into normal. Remember the Habesha adage, that says, for example, in the old times, when there is an era of war and turmoil, when that ends, the emperors or the kings proclaim, "Haristai Haras, Nagadai Nagad," which means, and it's almost like, the farmer, let him till, and the trader, let him trade. So everything has turned into peace. That kind of normalcy is what they want. The people just want to be left alone. The interference of the government in their lives has been too much. This is a totalitarian system, unlike any other totalitarian, and unlike any other dictatorships. So that has to be stopped. How to do it? Of course, it will I mean, various things, but the main one is, as I said before, is to stop this indefinite national service. Has to be terminated. If people, if life has to be turned into normal in Eritrea. So that is one part of the normalization. Politically, I have also mentioned in most of the political, creating transitional government, democratic government, alliance with the rest. That also will be part of the stabilization of the country, to create an inclusive, constitutional, peaceful government would be one of our hopes. And then economically is that's a very interesting one, because in Eritrea there is no such thing as a national economy. There is a PFDJ economy. The party, it's unlike any other economy in the rest of the world. The party that leads the nation, which is known as HIGDEF or PFDJ, it monopolizes everything in the country. It owns the biggest commercial farmlands. It owns the trading, the trading, for example, if you go to Masawa, all the import and export are done by the government itself. It owns even the free labor. It owns the labor of the people. It owns the factories. I mean, there are few of them, but it owns those factories. But besides that, people have been comparing, for example, Eritrea with North Korea. But lately, I have come even to doubt that similarity, because the North Koreans do something. They do build skyscrapers, for example. They do build ballistic missiles. PFDJ is characterized by two things: by its evil designs, it's a very brutal government. So brutality is one of its trademarks. But much worse than that is it's an inept organization, a very inept organization. It cannot produce, it doesn't produce anything in Eritrea. The only organization, the only entity that produces in Eritrea are the mining companies, and those are because they are run by Western companies. They don't want any interference from the government. They have made it clear. Only they will ask the government when they need free labor. Else than that, they run it on their own. As a result of that, that is the only profitable thing that exists in Eritrea. Anything else, literally anything. I'm telling you, any project that, any economic project, any development project that this organization has undertaken in the last 30 years, it's almost like a reverse Midas touch. That's all. That's what I always say. Whatever PFDJ touches, it turns into ashes. Think about the railway that runs from Masawa to Asmara. They built it through self-reliance. It didn't last. It lasted only a few years, and then they have to stop because it became precarious for passengers. The, I mean, tens of millions of American dollars were spent to build the road from Masawa to Asab. It has never come to fruition. Either comes in, or the water seeps in, but they were unable to even asphalt a few kilometers of it. The Eritrean airlines they created, uh, it has been busted. I mean, almost it has been bankrupted 3 or 4 times. I mean, mention anything, even the biggest dams that they have created, either they don't know what to do with them, or they fill up with slit after a few, the micro dams especially, and then they are abandoned. There is not even housing. Take housing, for example. For 15 years, Eritrea is the only nation in the world that have prohibited its population from building any kind of houses for 15 long years. In Asmara, there hasn't been a single house built for 15 years. So you could imagine the ineptness of the organization. So when I say economically, how do we stabilize it? It is uh, by looking at what has been happening in Eritrea up to now, just by introducing market economy. And as I said before, for example, I mentioned the diaspora input would be tremendous, because the very people that have uh, left the country for good are the ones that are becoming millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires in the rest of Africa. If they had a chance to do that in Eritrea, they would have done that. So I believe that the diaspora input will help at different levels, not only economically. I mean, rebuilding the nation itself. Socially, also, they will have social input. For politically, for example, many of the Eritreans, here in USA, in Europe, they are the ones that have been immersed in Western values. They know how what voting means, what democracy means. So these are the people that will go back to Eritrea, at least some of them, to rebuild the nation. So we have this huge asset from diaspora input. So politically, socially, and economically, they will have a lion's share in stabilizing Eritrea. So we look at all these different factors in stabilizing Eritrea. All right.
Okay.
All right. I'm done with that one. That part of question.
Okay. Thank you. For those who are interested to check further and to contact the Seedling for peace and democracy in Eritrea, you have it on the screen, falsisalam.org. That's the website, and email falsisalam@gmail.com. Yusuf Gaurewat, thank you for your time, and hope to follow up with any progress this new movement would do in the near future.
Thank you very much, and I hope I will come back to elaborate. And thanks also for our listeners. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for following us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And since the last 4 weeks, we have been part of the Horn broadcasting services. We are also viewed in the Horn of Africa, in Tigray, in Eritrea, and Ethiopia, and the region in general. Those who want, to support the media and so on, support Horn broadcasting services, because we want to be present in the region, in the Horn of Africa region. I'll see you tomorrow with the H panel and another show on Saturday. And thank you. Have a good one.